Hello everyone, I'm Bruffy1322 and welcome to the final installment in the countdown of the best fully upgraded cars in GTA Online. If this is the first video you've seen in this series, click the annotation below or the link in the description and everything will be explained in the intro video. Otherwise, let's continue from where we finished off last time. So in the previous video we saw that the car in 6th position managed to get a lap time of 1 minute 4.102, and in 5th position we have the Infernus, which manages to break that 1 minute 4 barrier with a 1 minute 3.877. Now here we are, these are the top 5 quickest cars in the game. We've tested 135 fully upgraded cars before this to get to this point, and we are finally here with the 5 best fully upgraded cars in the entire game. And I'll be honest, it was a bit of a surprise to me that the Infernus managed to break into that top 5. Initially when I started to test it, it wasn't that quick. But you do have to drive it quite a bit and you do have to get used to it. It's got a bit of a different driving style that's required to get the good lap time out of the Infernus. And funnily enough, it's the same sort of driving style that's required to get a good lap time out of our 4th placed car as well. So with the all-wheel drive system of the Infernus and the spoiler helping it around the corners, it does have some good acceleration out of the corners as well. The Infernus can give you a very good lap time once you get used to it. Obviously it's about 0.3 of a second quicker than the cars that we saw in 6th, 7th and 8th positions in the previous video, but it's a very quick car and it's certainly worthy of being in that top 5 once you get used to it. So in 4th position we have the best sports car in the game. It's the Elegy, of course. Was it ever going to be anything different? With a 1 minute 0.542, it's about 0.3 of a second quicker than the Infernus and about 0.6 of a second quicker than the next best sports cars that we saw in the previous video. Now that isn't a lot, I mean, it used to be quite a bit more than that, but the spoiler update kind of helped the cars that were below it. It gave the cars that needed more traction the better end of the deal really. The Elegy always had a hell of a lot of traction. It didn't really need any more from adding a spoiler. Having said that, the Elegy still manages to be top dog by a reasonable amount. 0.6 of a second is quite a reasonable amount, but similarly to the Infernus, you have to get used to it. You have to drive it differently to most other cars, and if you get it a little bit wrong, both the Infernus and the Elegy can oversteer on you very hard and spin out. So you do have to be careful with them. They will bite you if you drive them incorrectly, but ultimately they will give you the better lap times, and in the case of the Elegy, it will be the quickest sports car in the game around most tracks. So the top 3 are in a completely different league of their own, and we start with the Turismo R in 3rd position. These cars, the top 3 cars, are completely obliterating everything else. With a 1 minute 2.7, we're almost a second clear of the car in 4th place, obviously the Elegy that we've just seen, and it's incredible the amount of lap time that's been shaved off what we've just seen. We had 4 cars in the previous video that managed to get a 1 minute 4 lap time. We've had 2 cars in this video that got a 1 minute 3, and already we're into the 1 minute 2 lap times. And these cars, these top 3 cars, they just feel so raw and so powerful, and that's what really makes them the best 3 cars in the game. They have so much power behind them, but they also have the traction to be able to use it effectively. And it's a very similar story with all of the top 3 cars. There isn't a lot to separate them. They have slightly different characteristics. For example, the Turismo R is similar to the Cheetah in how it's quite pointy, that you can point the front end in and get the acceleration on and it'll stick with you. But they are very similar, all 3 of them, and they all give you some fantastic lap times, and you can use all 3 of them in a race. But in 2nd place we have the old guard, the Entity XF, the one that always used to be the quickest car until we had DLC vehicles come into the mix. With a 1 minute 2.706, the Entity is pretty much identical in terms of lap time to the Turismo R, obviously beating it by just under 1/10 of a second. It is our 2nd best supercar in the game, and it's amazing that after all this time the Entity still manages to be up there. It's not that far off the top spot that it always used to hold. And the spoiler update, in the same way as with the Elegy that we saw earlier, it gave the Entity more traction than it really needed. The Entity was always the best for traction. It always had the most traction out of any car in the game, and that is still the case. But the spoiler helped other cars more than it helped the Entity. Having said that, the power of the Entity still allows it to be up there in terms of lap time. And with it only being a tenth of a second away from the Turismo, it would be very interesting to see a race with a grid full of Entities and Turismos all battling it out for a win. However, here we are coming up to the first placed car in the entire game, the quickest car in the entire game, and it does eke out quite a bit of a gap over the two that we've just seen. Obviously, it's the Zentorno. Was it ever going to be in any doubt? The Zentorno is a monster. With a 1 minute 2.069, it's 7/10 of a second quicker than the last two supercars that we just saw. Absolutely incredible lap time there. The Zentorno has an incredible amount of power, an unbelievable amount of acceleration coming out of the corners, and just enough traction to make it all fit together perfectly. You can really hang it right on the edge with the Zentorno, and it will give you that extra bit of lap time that just elevates it above the last two. Now, in a racing situation, I will say that the Entity and the Turismo can definitely hold their own, in terms of being consistent over a number of laps. The Entity and the Turismo can definitely be used in a racing situation against the Zentorno. It's just that the Zentorno will always have that little bit of extra pace in its back pocket, and over a one lap situation, in terms of a hot lapping situation, the Zentorno is always going to be the top dog. It's so raw, it's so powerful, and it's just incredible around the corners. It's an amazing car, and it's our best fully upgraded car in GTA Online. So there we have it. We've gone through 140 different vehicles, fully upgraded them, tested them all, and there we have the entire list finally completed. Let me know down in the comments what you thought about the top 5 cars that you saw in this video, what you thought about the series in its entirety, of any cars sort of shocked you and surprised you with where they've been, and let me know whether you've enjoyed the series as well, because that's what's most important. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I really do appreciate it. Go back and watch the previous videos if you haven't seen them already and this is the first that you've seen. We will be doing the bikes next. I really appreciate you watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and I'll see you next time.